The ballroom lights blazed white across polished marble floors, catching the gold trim of the city police uniforms lined near the stage. Cameras clicked. Applause rippled like static. Malik Turner adjusted his tie, deep navy silk, the only thing betraying his nerves. He had rehearsed his opening line 100 times. "Good evening, everyone. Sir!" "Step away from the podium." The voice cracked through the mic, sharp, commanding. Officer Grant's boot struck the stage with a kind of authority reserved for humiliation. Malik froze. The crowd quieted. Grant's eyes narrowed. "This area is restricted. Maintenance crew enters from the side door." A ripple of murmurs. Someone in the front row shifted uncomfortably. Malik tried to speak. "I think you—" The slap came before the sentence finished. A collective gasp. Cameras captured the moment, the sound of palm meeting flesh echoing off the ballroom walls. Malik's glasses hit the stage floor, one lens cracking clean through. For a heartbeat, he didn't move. The officer's hand hovered, still raised, trembling with unspent arrogance. Then came the whisper from the mayor's assistant, cutting like glass through the stunned silence. "That's the keynote speaker. Officer." Grant's face drained of color. The lights above hummed louder. The press cameras kept rolling. Malik lifted his head slowly, blood pooling at the corner of his lip, eyes clear with something far colder than pain. He didn't say a word. But the silence that followed would break the city. The ballroom was still vibrating with that one sharp sound. The slap Malik Turner stood motionless, palm-shaped red mark burning across his cheek. His breath came shallow, his mind skipping frames like broken film. For a second he thought maybe the lights were too hot, that the ringing in his ear wasn't humiliation but feedback from the mic. Then he saw the faces. Rows of donors, officers and city officials frozen in perfect disbelief. The mayor's wife, halfway to a nervous sip of wine. 2 photographers exchanging uncertain glances. And the officer, Grant, still holding his posture, half defensive, half regretless. "Sir? I thought he wasn't supposed—" Grant's voice faltered. The mayor moved forward. "Officer, step down. Now." Security swarmed the stage, not toward Grant, but toward Malik. Hands reached out. "Sir, please come with us." Malik blinked, confusion nodding with fury. "Me?" Just for protocol, he wanted to laugh. Instead, he bent, retrieved his cracked glasses, and followed them off stage. The cameras stayed locked on him. In the corridor, the hum of the ballroom dimmed into a cold hallway silence. The city PR director intercepted them. "We need to manage this, Mr. Turner. We deeply apologize. Officer Grant misread the situation." "Misread?" Malik's voice came low. "You think that's a misread?" She avoided his eyes. "We'll issue a statement." Malik looked past her to the closed doors, to the echo of applause that would never return. "You're not hearing it," he said quietly. That wasn't confusion. That was reflex. Her silence confirmed it. Outside reporters had already gathered. The first headline would appear within the hour. Ballroom incident. Malik stood under the flashing lights, feeling every lens aim like a weapon. His cheek still stung, but beneath it, something else stirred, a slow, focused fire. He didn't know it yet, but this was only the opening act. The clip hit the internet before Malik reached his car. By midnight, it was everywhere. News feeds, gossip blogs, late-night commentary. 30 seconds of humiliation, slowed down, captioned, dissected. The slap replayed in endless loops, freeze frames, zoom-ins, reaction gifs. Each replay stripped context until all that remained was a spectacle of dominance and disbelief. Officer defends stage integrity after mistaken identity. Keynote chaos, misunderstanding or misconduct. Black man slapped at civic gala, Twitter erupts. Malik watched it once, then closed his laptop. He sat in his apartment, lights off, the glow of street lamps cutting lines across the floor. His phone buzzed. Texts from colleagues, journalists, family. Some sympathetic, others cautious. One from his sister, Alicia. "Don't let them own the story. Speak first." Another from an unknown number. "Stay quiet. You'll get a settlement. Don't ruin your career." He exhaled slowly, rubbing the bridge of his nose. He could still feel the echo of that palm on his face, as if it had left a fingerprint on his nerves. The next morning, the city woke, divided. The mayor's office called it a regrettable misunderstanding. The police union released a statement, defending Officer Grant's split second, Decision in a tense environment. A local talk show host smirked through her segment. If he's really that important, why didn't anyone recognize him? The laughter in the studio audience burned worse than the slap. Malik's colleague, Henry, came by his office. They're trying to bury it under language, then, he said, dropping a stack of printouts. This is what they do, turn outrage into confusion. Malik barely heard him. They already wrote the ending before I said a word. Henry leaned forward. Then write your own. Later that evening, Malik met with Renee Lewis, an investigative journalist he'd known from a social justice conference years ago. She looked exhausted but sharp, her notepad open before she even sat down. Grant's record isn't clean, she said quietly. There have been complaints. None went anywhere. Malik frowned. Internal affairs? Buried, like always. But this, she tapped her phone, this is visible. You can't hide a slap broadcast to 1,000 screens. He hesitated. They'll twist it. Say I provoked him. They already are, Renee said. But you have something they don't, truth on tape. Use it. For a moment, Malik didn't respond. He looked out the cafe window, where 2 teenagers were laughing at their phones, probably watching his humiliation. The city lights blurred against the glass. He finally spoke, voice quiet but firm. I won't let my name become their distraction. Renee nodded. Then we start with facts. No emotion, no apology, just exposure. When Malik returned home that night, he found a thick envelope at his door. No return address. Inside, a typed message, watch your tone. You don't want this to escalate. He stared at the paper, the words sharp against the white. His pulse stayed steady. He folded it once, dropped it in a drawer, and turned back to his laptop. The draft of his public statement blinked on the screen. What happened on that stage was not a misunderstanding. It was a mirror, one that showed this city exactly what it tries not to see. He saved it but didn't post yet. Timing would matter. Outside, a siren cut through the night. Rising, falling, then gone. Malik sat in the silence that followed, jaw tight. He didn't know if tomorrow would bring apology or escalation. But he understood now. The slap wasn't the story, it was the trigger, and the system had just fired first. The mayor's office issued a statement the next morning. We regret the unfortunate incident at last night's gala. Officer Grant has been placed on administrative leave pending review. We invite Mr. Turner to join us at a joint press conference tomorrow for an open dialogue about the events and our commitment to ensuring transparency. Malik's phone buzzed with calls, texts, and emails. Most were from news outlets, but a few from people he barely knew, offering support in the form of advice. Don't escalate. You don't want to make things worse. He didn't respond to any of them. He didn't know what to feel, what to think. The press conference loomed, and with it the cold certainty that this would not be about him. It would be about controlling the story. Malik knew it. They knew it. But this time it was his turn to take the microphone. The press room was sterile. White walls, soft lighting, podiums at the front. A large steel-gray backdrop with the city seal. A handful of reporters shifted in their seats, some with cameras, others scribbling notes. A couple of technicians were adjusting wires, checking sound levels. Officer Grant was already seated at one of the tables, his hands folded before him, eyes downcast. Malik stood in the doorway, his breath heavy in his chest. The mayor was seated next to Grant, wearing his best conciliatory smile. Mr. Turner, over here. A PR assistant waved him in. Malik walked in. Head held high, but inside, the anger coiled tighter with each step. The cameras clicked. He took his seat beside Grant, who shifted uncomfortably, his uniform pressed neatly like nothing had happened. The mayor began. Thank you all for being here. We've called this press conference to address the events of last night's gala. What occurred was unfortunate, and we believe this is an opportunity for reconciliation. Malik's jaw tightened. He wasn't here to reconcile. He was here to speak. The first question came from a reporter near the front. Officer Grant, can you explain what happened from your perspective? Grant cleared his throat. I believe I misinterpreted the situation. I thought Mr. Turner was an intruder. My actions were out of line, but before he could finish, the next question cut through. Malik, can you tell us how this event made you feel? Malik hesitated. The room felt colder now, and he knew what they wanted. A soundbite. A moment of emotional vulnerability to tame the chaos. Something they could use to bury the real story. He leaned forward, his eyes steady. What happened last night wasn't about a misunderstanding. Officer Grant didn't misinterpret anything. He saw a black man in a suit on a stage, and in that moment he didn't see a keynote speaker. He saw a threat. The room went silent. Grant's eyes widened, and the mayor shifted uncomfortably in his seat. But Malik didn't break his gaze. "Do you think this was a random mistake?" Malik continued. "Or do you think this was an act of power, a reminder that people like me, black men, are still seen as less than?" A slap, a moment, but with a history behind it. A nervous cough from the front. A reporter glanced at his notes, clearly unsure of how to follow up. Malik could hear the panic creeping in. The narrative was unraveling, and they weren't prepared for it. The mayor finally spoke, his tone sharp, cutting through the tension. "What you're saying is—" "No," Malik interrupted. "What I'm saying is simple. This isn't a misunderstanding. What happened wasn't an accident. It's systemic. It's what happens when black men are expected to stay in their lane, and when we don't, this is what happens. This is the real problem." He stood up, the words out before he could stop them. "I'm not here for a press release. I'm here to speak the truth. And if that's inconvenient for you—" Grant suddenly stood as well, his voice thick. "You don't get to turn this around on me." The mayor raised a hand, silencing him. "That's enough, Mr. Turner, please," Malik cut him off. "I'm done." The cameras clicked again as he turned and walked out, his heels tapping hard on the floor, a quiet defiance trailing behind him. Outside, the press waited, eager for sound bites for the aftermath. Malik paused for a moment before walking past the reporters, no longer caring about the questions or the twisted narratives. In the distance, he could already hear them, the murmurs. They'd twist it. They'd frame him as the angry black man, as the instigator, the troublemaker, but he was done playing along. The truth was out now. The cameras would capture it, whether they liked it or not. And if they wanted to bury it, he'd make them dig their own grave. The phone calls started the next day, but they weren't from reporters. The first was from the head of the conference committee for the upcoming leadership summit Malik was scheduled to keynote in a few weeks. "Mr. Turner," she said, voice smooth, practiced, "we regret to inform you that we've decided to postpone your speaking engagement. There's been a shift in the event's direction. We're looking at new speakers." Malik's jaw clenched. "You're canceling?" "I'm afraid so. We've received some concerns. From who?" There was a pause. "It's a matter of logistics. We'll follow up with a formal statement." He hung up, the weight of her polite words sinking deeper than he expected. It wasn't just a cancellation, it was a message. One by one, the cancellations stacked up. He was uninvited to panels. Conference calls went unanswered. Other speaking engagements faded into thin air. Each was framed as logistical, financial, or, at worst, a sudden change in programming priorities. But Malik understood the pattern. This was the quiet, methodical retaliation that had been set in motion the moment he stepped away from the press conference. Each loss felt small, but together they were suffocating. The city's institutions were systematically closing ranks. It wasn't overt, but it was intentional. His name was being erased from future opportunities, painted as a liability. The unspoken message was clear. We control the narrative. You don't get to disrupt it. Renee's text came in the late afternoon. "I've been digging. Internal memos show meetings between PR teams, department heads. Your name's been flagged. They're not just freezing you out. They're preparing a full-scale smear. Be ready." Malik stared at the screen, the weight of it settling like concrete in his chest. But even as the panic began to rise, something in him hardened. He wasn't just going to accept this. He wouldn't let it be erased. That night, he sat at his desk, staring at the flickering cursor on the blank document. The statement he'd drafted earlier felt insufficient now. He needed something more, something that could pierce the silence they were trying to impose on him. He opened his email and began drafting a letter, not for the press, but for the people who mattered most. His community. The email was simple, straightforward. A message to anyone who would listen. Subject: reclaiming the narrative. It's been days since I was humiliated on that stage. Since a police officer thought it was his right to slap me because I was standing where I wasn't supposed to be, in his mind. Since then, I've been asked countless times what went wrong, what could have been done differently. But here's the truth. Nothing went wrong. Everything went according to plan. They're trying to silence me because they don't want to deal with the truth. And the truth is this: racism isn't just about hate. It's about power, about control. It's about ensuring that people like me, black people, don't take up space, don't get too loud. It's about making sure we know our place. And when we step out of line, they remind us quietly, slowly, that we'll never truly belong. But I'm done with silence. Done with accepting the handouts they offer in exchange for our compliance. Done with the polite explanations and false apologies. I will not be erased. The real story isn't the slap. It's what comes after. It's the systems that allow this to happen, over and over, and the people who perpetuate them in silence. I am asking you to stand with me, not in anger but in truth. Speak out. Ask questions. Don't let them control the narrative. Malik Turner. He hit send before he could second-guess it. Renee responded quickly, her message short but pointed. This is the way. They can't silence this. Malik leaned back, the weight of it lifting just a little. He didn't know if this would lead anywhere, but it was a step. No longer playing by their rules. The silence they were trying to impose on him would never be his to carry. The following morning, Malik was surprised to see a series of supportive responses. The first came from a local community leader, then a university professor, and then more. People who were rallying behind him. He knew the risks. There were already whispers about the consequences of provoking the system. But in the replies, the names started to change. More community members, activists, even some public figures who had remained silent now spoke up. It wasn't a flood. Not yet. But it was enough to make the institution shift, just a little. The crack was there. The city was listening. Malik didn't know how far this would go or if it would be enough. But one thing was clear. He wasn't going to wait for them to control the story. He was going to keep speaking. They might shut him out, but they couldn't shut him down. It started long before the ballroom. Long before Officer Grant's slap. Before the applause turned to gasps. Malik had spent his life mastering the art of stillness, the kind of quiet that kept him safe. He was 16 the first time he was pulled over. His father was in the passenger seat, hands already raised before the officer reached the window. The patrol lights flickered red and blue across their faces. License and registration. Malik's voice cracked as he handed it over. Was I speeding? The officer didn't answer. He just circled the car once, shining his flashlight through the back seat like he was searching for a crime that hadn't happened yet. When they were finally released, Malik's hands trembled on the steering wheel. His father's didn't. Remember this, his father said quietly. They're not afraid of your mistakes. They're afraid of your presence. Malik didn't reply, but he never forgot. Years later, he learned how to carry that silence like armor. When a coworker joked about how articulate he was, he smiled. When he was passed over for a promotion he had earned, he congratulated the chosen candidate. When a client mistook him for security at his own firm's event, he offered directions to the restroom. He absorbed it all, the microaggressions, the side glances, the polite erasures. His father's voice always echoing. They expect your anger. They fear your calm, so he stayed calm. For years. Until the ballroom. After the press conference, Malik couldn't sleep. He walked the city at night, through the empty streets where the glass towers turned dark, where even the sirens seemed tired. He stopped at a small park, the one where his father used to bring him to talk about the world and its cruel balances. He sat on a bench, cold metal against his palms, and remembered his father's last words before passing. Dignity isn't what they give you, son. It's what you refuse to let them take. That sentence had sounded noble when Malik was younger, but now in the silence of the city it felt heavier, almost unbearable. Because dignity had a price. It meant staying quiet when every cell in your body screamed to fight. It meant enduring, surviving, existing in spaces that were built to erase you. But something had changed. That slap had cracked the armor he'd spent decades building. The stillness was gone, and in its place was something sharper, more dangerous, a clarity that silence had never given him. The next day, Malik went through his father's old things, worn notebooks, yellowed papers. He found a letter, one his father had written but never sent. It was addressed to a city official who had ignored his father's repeated reports of workplace discrimination. The letter ended with a single line. You can bury my complaint, but you can't bury the truth. It will surface with or without my voice. Malik stared at that sentence for a long time. It was as if his father had written it for him. He folded the letter, placed it in his wallet, then he stood, straightened his shoulders and whispered into the quiet room. It's time. He didn't know exactly what that meant yet, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. The silence that had protected him all these years was now his enemy. And for the first time in his life, Malik was ready to break it. The morning began with a phone call from Renee. No greeting, no build-up, just the sharp intake of breath she always had when something serious had surfaced. "Malik," she said, voice low. "I found something. You need to see this in person." 30 minutes later, they sat in her small newsroom office, blinds half drawn, screens flickering with open files. Renee's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up a video. The footage was grainy, recorded from someone's phone. The banner at the bottom read, "Police Training Seminar, Internal Footage." Malik leaned closer. On the screen, Officer Grant stood before a group of trainees, smirking. "You know what I call it?" he said, laughter in his tone. "Stage control. You can't let some guy in a suit make you look like a fool. You handle it before it handles you." Laughter erupted in the background. Someone clapped. Grant continued. "That slap? You saw it. Sometimes you gotta remind people of the hierarchy. Cameras or not." The room erupted again, half amused, half approving. Renee froze the frame on Grant's smug expression. "This was recorded 2 days after the incident," she said. "Internal source leaked it to me anonymously. They said it was being suppressed by the department's legal team." Malik's throat tightened. The video wasn't just evidence, it was a confession. A glimpse into the rot beneath the apology statements, beneath the press conference performances. He leaned back, eyes fixed on the frozen screen. "They think it's a joke." Renee nodded grimly. "And they're betting you'll stay quiet." Malik looked at her. "Not this time." That evening, Malik drafted another statement, but this time it wasn't an essay or an appeal. It was exposure. He wrote one sentence, attached the video file, and sent it to every journalist, civil rights organization, and independent outlet he knew. Subject: "You deserve to see this." He hesitated for 1 second before hitting send. Then the message was gone, out in the world, unstoppable. The next morning, the city was on fire again, digitally, politically, morally. The video spread faster than the original slap. The footage was damning. Laughter, arrogance, an entire department silence as proof of complicity. News anchors' tones shifted from speculative to outraged. Protesters gathered outside police headquarters by noon, holding signs that read, "Stage control, system control." Malik's inbox flooded again, but this time the messages were different. Words like thank you, courage, about time replace settlement, silence, compromise. Still, the threats came too. Anonymous numbers, blocked callers, vague warnings about career suicide. One voicemail hissed through static. "You think this ends well for you?" He deleted it without hesitation. By afternoon, the mayor's office called. The voice on the line was polished but nervous. "Mr. Turner, the city is in chaos. You've made your point, but we need to handle this internally. We're prepared to make a statement of shared accountability if you—" Malik cut him off. "If I stay quiet?" Silence on the line. Then, "We're asking for discretion." "Discretion," Malik repeated, voice flat. "That's what you call it when you hide the truth." He hung up. That night, Renee appeared on live television holding the same footage Malik had released. "This," she said, looking straight into the camera, "is not an isolated act of misconduct. This is culture. This is training. This is normalization of abuse disguised as authority. Officer Grant didn't act alone, he acted as taught." Her words cut deep. Malik watched from his apartment, the dim glow of the TV reflecting off the cracked lens of his old glasses, still sitting on the table. The city's pressure built hour by hour. Protests grew. Demands for Grant's dismissal and departmental audit exploded online. The mayor's office scrambled to distance itself, releasing hollow phrases about community healing and policy review. But the public had stopped listening. Malik knew what was coming next. Retaliation, investigations, attempts to discredit him. The system never surrendered quietly. Yet that night, standing by his window, watching the sea of protesters below carrying signs under the streetlights, he felt something he hadn't in weeks, resolve, not peace. Not victory, but direction. For the first time since the slap, he wasn't reacting. He was leading. Renee called again around midnight. Her voice carried fatigue and fire in equal measure. "They're holding an emergency session tomorrow," she said. "Internal affairs. Closed doors. No press." Malik's hand tightened around the phone. "Then I'll be there. They won't want you in the room." He exhaled slowly. "Then I'll stand outside it." Renee hesitated. This could break them, Malik. He looked back out the window at the people, the movement, the noise. "No," he said quietly. "It won't break them. It'll expose them. Breaking comes next." He turned off his phone and sat in silence. The world outside was loud, but inside everything was still again. This time, it wasn't the silence of fear, it was the silence before impact. By sunrise, the city was already awake and furious. The leaked video had ignited something deeper than outrage. It had pulled the curtain back on a truth too many already suspected, that what happened to Malik Turner wasn't an accident. It was a system functioning exactly as designed. News anchors no longer said incident. They said assault. Reporters no longer said dispute. They said abuse of authority. Outside City Hall, crowds formed early. Signs swayed in the cold morning wind. Justice for Malik Turner. No more stage control. Silence is complicity. Malik stood at the edge of the crowd, hood pulled low, watching it all unfold. No speech, no appearance. Just observation. The noise, the chants, it wasn't about him anymore. It was about what he'd exposed. Renee found him in the crowd, a coffee in one hand, camera in the other. "They're holding the mayor's press briefing in an hour," she said. "Looks like damage control." He nodded. "They'll try to rewrite it. They already are." The briefing room was packed. The mayor stepped up to the podium, face drawn, voice measured. "We are deeply troubled by the recent revelations," he began, eyes flicking nervously between the cameras. "Officer Grant's comments in that training footage do not represent our department's values. We have suspended him indefinitely, and we are launching a full investigation into the training program." A reporter shouted from the back. "Is Malik Turner here?" The mayor hesitated. "Mr. Turner has chosen to remain private during this process. We ask that the public respect his space," Renee whispered from the side of the room. Translation: "They don't want you talking." Malik said nothing. Another voice rose. "Mayor, do you acknowledge that this was racially motivated?" The mayor's mask faltered. "We believe this was a matter of misjudgment." Renee's voice cut through the crowd. "The video proves it wasn't a misjudgment. It was training. It was instruction. That's systemic." The room erupted, questions flying, cameras flashing. The mayor's composure cracked. Malik watched from the back. He could have stepped forward, claimed the spotlight again, but something inside told him this was no longer his stage. His presence had already done what it needed to. The truth had its own momentum now. By afternoon, the protests grew. Schools walked out. Churches opened their doors for community meetings. Every street corner buzzed with conversation, tension, hope, anger. Officer Grant's name trended for all the wrong reasons. His face, smiling in the training video, was replayed across every screen in the country. The police union tried to defend him, calling it taken out of context. But context was all anyone could see now. The words, the laughter, the smirk. It was unfiltered truth. Malik's sister Alicia called that night. Her voice trembled between pride and fear. "They're saying your name everywhere," she said. "Even CNN picked it up." "You've started something," he exhaled slowly. "I didn't start it. It was already here. I just stopped pretending not to see it." "Still," she said, "Dad would have been proud." That one hit harder than he expected. He looked at the folded letter in his wallet, the one his father had written decades ago, warning that truth always surfaces. Maybe it finally had. Later that night, Renee came by his apartment again. She looked exhausted, but her eyes burned with that same relentless fire. "They're calling for a tribunal," she said. "Official hearing. Department oversight, media coverage. They can't bury this anymore." Malik leaned against the counter, the city lights reflecting off the cracked lens of his old glasses. "A tribunal," he repeated quietly. "Yeah, you'll be called to testify." He nodded once. "Then that's where this ends." Renee hesitated. "Or begins." That night, Malik couldn't sleep. His mind replayed every word, every frame of the video, Every humiliation he'd endured, not just on that stage, but over years of quiet endurance. He remembered the look in Grant's eyes before the slap, an arrogance so casual it didn't even recognize itself as hate. And he realized something painful and necessary. Grant wasn't the point anymore. The system was. The habits, the culture, the comfortable blindness. He thought of all the times he had smiled through insults, accepted apologies meant to silence him, swallowed pride just to survive. That man was gone. The next morning he stood before his mirror, straightened his tie, the same deep navy silk he'd worn the night of the gala. The crack in his glasses caught the light, a sharp reminder of what was broken and what was still his. He looked at his reflection and said softly, "Time to speak." Outside, the city waited. The headlines that morning read, "Public Tribunal scheduled in Turner case, Officer Grant to testify." City faces reckoning over systemic bias. The movement had a name now. The stage we stand on, and for the first time, Malik didn't feel like the man who'd been slapped. He felt like the man who had made the world finally look. The tribunal chamber was packed wall to wall. Press, lawyers, officers, citizens. Every breath hummed with tension. The fluorescent lights were too bright, the air too still. Malik sat at the witness table, palms pressed together, heartbeat steady but heavy. The seal of the city loomed behind the panel of officials, gold letters on blue velvet, a symbol that once meant order, now a reminder of betrayal. At the far side, Officer Grant sat rigid in his uniform. His badge was gone, his face pale, jaw locked. He didn't look up. The chair of the tribunal, an older black woman named Judge Evelyn Cross, cleared her throat. "We are convened to determine whether Officer William Grant's actions on the night of the Unity Gala constitute misconduct, abuse of authority, and violation of civil rights statutes." Her voice didn't waver. The cameras rolled. The city attorney began. "We will hear testimony from Mr. Malik Turner, the victim of the incident. Mr. Turner, please describe in your own words what occurred." Malik stood slowly. His hands trembled once, then steadied against the table. "It was supposed to be a night of unity," he said. "I'd been invited to speak about community redevelopment, about how we rebuild what we've lost. But before I could even reach the stage, Officer Grant stopped me." He looked at Grant, then back at the panel. He didn't ask who I was. He didn't check credentials. He saw a black man in a suit walking toward a podium and decided I didn't belong. Grant shifted in his seat. The cameras caught it. Malik continued. "When I told him I was the keynote speaker, he laughed. Then he slapped me. Right there under the lights in front of everyone." The room was silent. Even the sound of pen scratches ceased. Grant's lawyer rose. "Mr. Turner, is it possible the officer misunderstood your intentions?" Security was heightened. Malik's voice was calm, precise. "You don't mistake a keynote speaker for a threat. You don't slap misunderstanding into a man. You do that to remind him who's allowed to stand where." Gasps rippled through the audience. Judge Cross leaned forward. "Continue, Mr. Turner," Malik exhaled. What followed wasn't new. It was just recorded this time. What people saw in that clip, that wasn't a single bad decision. It was training. It was a system teaching its servants to distrust people like me, even when we're wearing ties, holding speeches, holding hope. When the defense called Grant, the air chilled. He walked to the stand, shoulders squared, eyes glassy. "Officer Grant," the city attorney began. "Do you admit to striking Mr. Turner?" Grant hesitated. "Yes, I struck him. Why?" He swallowed hard. "I thought he was a protester." There'd been threats. "I made a split-second decision." Renee, filming from the gallery, whispered under her breath. "That's the script." The attorney played the training footage, Grant in uniform, instructing cadets, "Don't let them control the stage. Show authority. If you hesitate, you lose." The same smirk, the same tone. When the video ended, the room felt smaller. Grant's voice cracked. "It was just talk. Just training. Everyone says stuff like that." Judge Cross fixed her gaze on him. "Not everyone teaches violence as discipline, officer." He said nothing. After a brief recess, Malik was recalled for cross-examination. Grant's lawyer leaned in. "Mr. Turner, do you believe Officer Grant's actions were personal?" Malik shook his head. "No, that's what makes it worse. It wasn't personal, it was procedural. The line hit like a verdict. Hours passed. Testimonies stacked. An ethics expert testified about implicit bias. A former recruit described being told to keep control over unpredictable audiences. The pattern was undeniable. By late afternoon, Judge Cross called for closing statements. The city attorney stood. This case isn't about one slap. It's about a culture that created permission for it. A culture where authority justifies humiliation and where image outweighs truth. Mr. Turner stood on that stage for every person told they don't belong in the places they built. We cannot move forward if we let this go unanswered. Then, silence. Grant's lawyer muttered something about retraining and policy reform, but no one was listening. All eyes returned to Malik. He didn't plan to speak again, but the judge nodded toward him. Mr. Turner, final words? He rose slowly. I've spent my life teaching others how to rebuild neighborhoods. But before we rebuild streets, we have to rebuild minds. I'm not asking for revenge. I'm asking for recognition of what we let happen when power goes unchecked. He looked directly at Grant. You hit me to make me small. But it didn't work. It made the truth bigger. The judge's gavel struck once. This hearing is adjourned. The decision will be announced publicly tomorrow. Outside, the crowd waited. Reporters swarmed. Flashbulbs cut through the dusk. Mr. Turner, how do you feel? He paused on the courthouse steps. Tired, he said. But awake. Renee stepped beside him. Whatever happens tomorrow, you change the story. Malik nodded. No. We told it right for once. Behind them, the courthouse glowed against the evening sky. The city had heard the truth, and could never pretend it hadn't. Morning came like Judgment Day. The courthouse square was a sea of faces. Students, journalists, clergy, activists, parents, even off-duty officers. The air carried that electric stillness before a storm. Banners hung from the railings. Accountability is not revenge. We belong on every stage. Inside, Malik sat in the front row beside Renee. His suit was the same dark navy he'd worn at the gala, pressed clean, unflinching. The tribunal panel filed in. Cameras clicked like thunder. Judge Cross began without preamble. Her voice was measured, but beneath it, the weight of history. After reviewing testimony, evidence, and departmental policy, this tribunal finds Officer William Grant guilty of misconduct, abuse of authority, and violation of civil rights statutes. Effective immediately, he is dismissed from service and referred to federal inquiry for prosecution. The words fell like steel. A hush. Then applause erupted. Grant sat motionless, face drained, eyes darting for an exit that wasn't there. Reporters surged forward. His lawyer shielded him, murmuring about appeals. But the sound was drowned beneath the rising chant outside. Justice for Malik! Justice for Malik. Renee pressed record, capturing everything. When Malik stepped outside, sunlight hit him like absolution. The crowd parted. Cameras turned. For a moment, he felt the weight of it. Not fame, but gravity. Someone handed him a microphone. He hesitated, then spoke. I didn't come here to destroy a man's life, he said. I came here to show you what power looks like when it stops listening. What we saw that night wasn't just my story. It was a mirror. And now that you've looked, don't turn away. Applause thundered. He stepped back, let the sound wash over him, and knew that was the last speech he needed to give. Hours later, Malik sat alone on the courthouse steps. The crowd had thinned. The chants faded into distant echoes. Renee joined him quietly. You did it, he shook his head. We did something. But the system's still there. It'll find new faces, new rules, new excuses. Then we keep filming, she said simply. He smiled faintly. That's how it starts again. The following days blurred. Interviews, statements, endless questions. Everyone wanted his reaction. Every headline carried his name. Keynote speaker turns national symbol of justice. Officer dismissed after public tribunal. Movement. The stage we stand on. Spreads to 10 cities. But behind the noise, Malik felt hollow. Vindicated, yes, but emptied. At night, he'd lie awake and see the flash of Grant's hand, the shocked faces, the sound of that single, humiliating slap. Justice didn't erase it. It only marked where the scar began. He started walking at dawn, long walks through the neighborhoods he once studied. Cracked sidewalks, boarded windows, murals fading under rain. The city still bled quietly. He thought, this is where healing has to live, not in courtrooms, but out here. A week later, Renee called him to a small community center downtown. Just come, she said. When he arrived, he froze. The room was full. Students, local shop owners, street pastors, journalists, and at the center, a makeshift banner. The Turner Initiative, Training for Equity in Law and Leadership. A woman approached him. The same volunteer from the gala, tears in her eyes. You showed us what we stopped believing we could do. He didn't know what to say. Renee stepped up beside him. They want you to lead it. Malik looked around. Ordinary faces, tired faces, hopeful faces. For the first time in months, he saw something larger than pain. Potential. He exhaled, slow and steady. All right, he said. Then let's build it right this time. Later that evening, he stood before a small mirror in the center's back office. The crack in his glasses caught the last slant of sunset. He thought about replacing them, but decided to keep them as they were. A reminder. He dialed Alicia. It's over, he said softly. No, she replied. It's beginning. A week later, Officer Grant's face appeared on the news again, this time escorted from a courthouse, charges formalized. The city had turned. The department had issued a statement promising reform. Whether they meant it or not, time would tell. Malik turned off the TV. Silence filled the room. He picked up his father's old letter again, edges worn, ink fading. The last line read, One day, you'll stand in the light that once burned you. He folded it carefully, slipped it back into his wallet, and smiled. At the next conference, months later, Malik stood backstage once more, microphone in hand. Lights dimmed. When the announcer's voice boomed, Please welcome our keynote speaker, Dr. Malik Turner. The crowd rose in applause. He stepped onto the stage. This time, no one stopped him. The air was still. The world was watching, he began. Justice isn't a destination. It's maintenance. And it begins with who we let speak. His voice was steady, unbroken. From the back of the room, Renee filmed quietly, a single beam of light cutting across his face. The same stage. The same man. But now the story was his. Months passed. Seasons shifted. The story that once burned across headlines became history, but not forgotten. In classrooms, Malik's speech was studied. In precincts, training modules quoted his testimony. The tribunal had forced the city's reflection, but the mirror never closed. Every reform meeting, every march, every uneasy conversation carried a trace of that night, the sound of a slap that awakened a nation. Malik lived quieter now. He taught workshops under the Turner Initiative, mentoring officers and youth together. No stage, no spotlight. He spoke less, listened more. The fame had dissolved, replaced by something steadier. Responsibility. One evening he visited the old gala hall, now renovated as a civic center. The lights were off, the seats empty. Dust floated in shafts of gold from the high windows. He walked to the same spot where it happened, center stage. He placed his hand against the wood. The silence there was different now. Not haunted, claimed. Renee arrived moments later, camera in hand as always. You still come back here? She asked softly. He nodded. Not to remember the pain. To measure the distance, she tilted her head. Between what and what? Between who I was, he said, and who had to exist after. She filmed him quietly, but he didn't pose this time. No grand statement, no rehearsed words. Just a man, standing on a floor that once tried to erase him, now standing freely. Outside, a group of students passed the doors, holding flyers for a protest downtown. Different cause, same fight. Malik watched them go, a faint smile on his lips. Renee followed his gaze. You think it ever ends? He shook his head. It shouldn't. The moment we think it's over, it begins again. He looked back at the stage one last time. That's why it has to remain. Later, he wrote in his journal, not for publication, not for anyone else. Justice doesn't live in verdicts. It lives in memory and in how we teach, how we treat, how we rebuild after breaking. The stage was never just a place to speak. It was the test of who gets to be heard. And now the stage belongs to everyone. He closed the notebook. Outside, city lights pulsed against the horizon. Restless, alive, unhealed, still trying. Malik turned off the lamp. stepped into the evening and blended into the moving world. The story that began with silence had ended with understanding. And somewhere in every voice that rose against injustice, a fragment of his stood too. The stage remained.